Hey, it's Drew Bentley here with Learn Guitar with Drew. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to strum the right way. But first, thank you so much for supporting what I'm doing here at this channel. Please hit that subscribe button and click that bell for notifications. And in the comment section down below, you'll find links for my websites and other guitar resources. Okay, so strumming a guitar should be simple enough, but this is one of the things that we have to get really good at right away to not sound not so good. So one of the very first things that happens when the student comes in for lessons is that they'll go to play the something for me so I can see what they do, and they just strum really hard. Okay, so that's the first thing we're going to address today, is when you're strumming, your right hand needs to be a paintbrush. You're not supposed to hit the strings too hard. You have to have some finesse and try to be musical with it when you strum. So for example, if I play a song and just go bash that string, that does not sound good. So however, if I pull back the reins a little bit, suddenly everything sounds a whole lot better. So even right now, when I'm playing, I'm aware of how hard I'm strumming the strings as I'm filming this, because I'm using a condenser microphone. The guitar is going through a system directly in, but there's still, this microphone picks up every little nuance and makes the picking sound even louder than it normally would be. So I'm hyper aware of that. So when I'm recording acoustic guitar on a record, I'll use a thin pick, like a really thin pick, to minimize that pick sound. This is a 1.0, it's a little thicker. So I'm being very cautious and thinking about my strumming while I'm doing it, so it sounds musical and it doesn't sound too obnoxious and loud. However, you also can't strum too softly either, because that doesn't sound good. So if you scrape the strings, that's a really not a very good sound either. So I always kind of go back to this Goldilocks philosophy. It can't be too hard, can't be too soft. You have to find that happy medium for just about everything when you play. So when I'm strumming, trying to get just the right amount of pressure on the strings, just the right amount of pressure to make it sound musical. And when you do that, you can also think about your pick actually having a little bit of give to it. So it just moves just a little bit. It's not super rigid, so that I can have just a little give. Like if you had popsicle sticks in the spokes of your bike, through the spokes, you have just a little bit of give. Now you can season that to taste and listen to it and try to make it musical on your own. And when you're listening, you're like, okay, that didn't sound so good. Maybe I could fix this to make that more musical. Okay, so the second thing is to strum more musically, to sound better, is the pick position itself. So there's a lot of people that come in that strum with their pick kind of scraping the strings, like you're scraping a plate if you're like cleaning your dishes. It doesn't sound so good. It's very thin and it doesn't have a lot of girth to it. The term is note bloom. So when you play a note, you have a consonant and then you have a vowel. Everything's like a little word. So if you have your pick the right way, you minimize the pick attack and you maximize the consonant. So it's more of a note bloom. So you'll notice if I take my pick, make it ever so slightly more perpendicular with the strings, suddenly now, with this to this, versus this. So now everything sounds more musical, bloomy. Okay, so try to work on getting your pick to be just the right angle until you get less scrape and more bloom. Okay, so the next thing is, when you're strumming an acoustic guitar or electric guitar, you can make a difference for the amount of treble and bass that you have depending on where your pick is strumming. If you pick closer to the bridge, you get more treble sounding. Closer to the neck is more bass sounding. So if you're going for like a James Bond sort of thing, Quentin Tarantino thing, I'll always strum down here for that kind of scrapey sound. But if you want something nice and fat, pretty, it's almost over the neck now. So I've moved my pick from here to here. Dramatic difference. If I play this here, it's not working anymore. But if I play this here, sounds completely different. So I can't get that sort of, you know, thing happening if I do that here. If I play it here, it's fatter, which is nice. Fat is nice if you're doing this. Okay, so that's how that works. You want to season to taste treble and bass. This is one of the inherent musical things that a guitar does, which is really kind of great without even using electronics or knobs or any of the EQs or just post-production. Your hands themselves make a difference for every note you're playing. So you'll notice if I take my pick and make it step number 2, the pick position's right and I'm strumming closer to the neck here. Now this jazz strumming chord I'm playing, it sounds really bloomy. If I played it like this, it would sound scrapey and not so right. See, it doesn't work. But if I'm playing, I'm more likely to play that down here. Up here, different. But that kind of sounds cool too. That kind of cuts the mids. So you can move that around anytime you want to change the sound of your strumming, which is really cool. The next thing is what I call carve the turkey. Okay, so if you're going to strum one chord, it's kind of cool to strum straight through the middle of the chord like this, like you're carving a turkey, you know. And that's a beautiful sound. However, this is a big problem for a lot of people. If you're strumming continuously, you have to pay attention to the fact that the fretboard has a radius. It's like the world is not flat, it's round. So when you strum, if you think of a Venn diagram, like the Olympic circles, down here I'm strumming this way. On the bottom, this is actually the bottom, I'm strumming this way. So I'm doing these cross semicircles over top of the radius of the fretboard. So think about Pete Townsend with his big circle strum thing. I know that was all for show, but he sort of was onto something there. If I do this, so I've separated the lower and the higher notes now. It doesn't sound like this. Now it sounds like this. So I'm going low, high, which is pretty awesome. The next thing is this low, high deal. If I separate that, when I'm strumming the Carve the Turkey, sometimes I'll do that for the first strum in a pattern, and then I'll do low, high. So if I go like, the first strum was straight through, and then I did low, high. Low, high. So that's really important to pay attention to as well while you're doing this. So that's step number 4. Strum straight through the strings for Carve the Turkey, or separate your strings low and high for just about anything else you're playing. So that bass strum thing is, bass chord thing is pretty common for music. You know, your whole life you've heard that kind of thing where it's like bass chord, bass chord. So you can do that with your pick just by going bass chord, and separate those two sounds. The next thing, kind of along those lines, is I like to think of my right hand as the drum set and the left hand as the piano. My right hand is going to play like a bass and a snare. Bass, snare. So what I can do is go bass, snare, bass, snare, bass, snare, bass, snare, bass, snare, bass, bass, snare. So anytime you strum something, if you do that with a chica, you can see what you're doing, you can hear that separation. So you can practice that with any chord you're playing. I go, I can tell boom to get and jacket to get and get. There's my drum set underneath while my left hand's doing all the work to play different notes and chords and stuff. So when you're playing your strumming patterns, you're going to break it down either into 8th notes or 16th notes. A lot of songs are 8th notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. But a lot of songs are 16th notes. So if I'm playing like, if I'm going like, that's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and that's an 8th note pattern. If I play something like this. When E end to 2, E end to 3, E end to 4, E end to. So that's a 16th note pattern. Some songs are 8th notes, some songs are 16th notes. So you kind of have to feel out where that is, and then your drum set's going to follow suit. If I'm doing eighth notes, it's bass, strum, which is like kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare. But if I'm doing 16th notes, it's more like kick a snare. You know, so I'm going low, high, low, high. I'm thinking of the actual strumming I'm doing rhythmically without thinking what my left hand's doing at all. Put them back together again to make the song happen. Okay, so a good way to practice building up to this is to do whole notes first. 2, 3, 4. When you're doing your chord changes, there'll be an entire lesson on this. Actually, I'll probably break down a lot of these things into smaller lessons, more specific and targeted lessons. But if you practice doing a whole note first, and then the half note, 2, 3, 4, 2, and then a quarter note, that'll help you build up to your eighth notes and ultimately your 16th notes. Now, the final thing about this when you're doing eighth notes and 16th notes is you can't just continuously strum where it sounds just terrible. And that's not even, I can't even deal with that. So I like to think of strumming as sort of like throwing a rock across the lake. Skip, skip, skip. We're going to strum, but then we're going to have dummy strum. So a lot of times you're going to miss. So maybe the pattern might be 1, 2, and 4, and down. So if you break that down, I'm going down, miss, down, up, down, up. So there's a miss in there. There's actually 2 misses. Down, miss, down, up, miss, up, down, up. So when you're doing that, make sure your right hand is flowing, like you're throwing a football, or you're shooting a basketball, or you're fly fishing or something. Your hand, actually conducting is pretty much the same motion too. Your hand has to be flippity floppity, so you don't do the you're not thinking down, up, down, up. It's supposed to be like a whip motion. So what comes down has to come back up again, sort of the opposite. So when you're practicing these strumming patterns, or not patterns, just basic strumming, remember sometimes you're going to miss the strings. Okay, so let's go back over these really quickly here. Step 1, paintbrush, nice and soft. Don't bash on the strings. Make sure you're paying attention to doing it musically. Be musical about your strumming. Pick position number 2. You don't want to scrape the strings. Sometimes you do, for pinch harmonics, but basically make it nice and squared up to get that nice bell tone. You're supposed to get that pretty more musical. Remember, more note than attack. The third thing was you can go to the right, to the what I call the west coast or the east coast, moving more east on your guitar to make it sound more trebly or more bassy. Trebly's here, bassy's here. Next thing is carving the turkey. The first strum, if you're doing one strum, it's awesome to go straight through with no kind of paying attention to the curvature of the fretboard, the radius. The next thing was the Venn diagram, which is semicircles. You're going low, high. That is absolutely like huge. If there's one thing about this entire lesson that makes the biggest difference, it's that. I mean, so many songs, that's how you strum. So if you're wondering how to get that thing, that's how it's done. But you notice the last drum I did, when I was doing just one strum, I carved the turkey. So that's pretty uniform for me. Next thing is practice your drum set. You can just do a chicka jam literally for half an hour. I missed it. There it is. The next thing is eighth notes for 16th notes. Sometimes you play eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and some strumming patterns require you to do 16th notes, which is more like a. So kind of pay attention to which rhythm you're playing as your subdivision underneath everything. Practice whole notes, half notes, and quarter notes to build up your chops if you're not there yet to do these faster strummings just start slower, and I'll have more lessons with more detailed ways to do that. And then if you put all that together and start working on those things individually, pay attention to them, be aware of them, and slowly but surely make everything more musical as you're playing, and iron these things out, your rhythm guitar playing will start to sound an awful lot better than it probably may have before. And you can apply this to literally everything that you're strumming, which is really kind of a cool thing because it's universal. It works on all things guitar that require strumming. So that's my lesson today on how to strum the right way. Hopefully it was helpful, and I appreciate you being here on the channel. Please continue to watch the videos, and if you have any comments or questions or things you'd like me to cover on the channel, please leave those in the comment section down below. Okay, well, thanks a lot. I can't wait to see you at the next lesson.